Hello, everyone. Welcome to Table Talk. I'm Heather Newton, lead organizer of Protospiel Online, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Michael Wostbrock and Jay Little. Hey, everybody. This week, we are on theme, and we're to animals theme as we're moving through the alphabet in our bingo card attributes. So, certainly, Michael has been designing a game that is very animal themed, so he's very excited about. It's one of his favorite kind of themes. So excited to talk about this one.
We'll definitely talk about this at some point because I've been given a lot of thought to animal-based card game design for 2+ years.
Yes, and so I don't know where to start. Well, and one thing too is like when you say animal theme, is it a whole bunch of animals that makes the theme animal theme, or could there be just one animal? Like as I was looking at my game shelf, my Taikanoko caught my eye, which is just one. It's just about a panda in a garden eating bamboo.
I think that counts. I think there's been a flush of bee games in the last decade or so, and I think of those as animal games. Just as long as as long as a creature is at the forefront of the thematic or even mechanical design, I'd put it in the animal bucket. It doesn't have to be a zoology game or a bird watching game or anything like that necessarily.
Yeah, bees was one that Jay brought up. Oh, it's taking a long time to load, but it should be there. It was loaded before I shared my screen. Silly. Problematic. Okay, there we go.
Specific amount of bees in the title, or a specific amount of E's in the title.
Right. Yeah. Specifically 5 E's. If you're looking it up.
At some point, someone realized, this has probably been known for a while, but like a bunch of people realized at once in the last decade or so that like the easiest connection to nature and hexagonal shapes, hexagons, was honeycomb, and there was this rush of bee games, at least in my perspective.
Yes, and actually, Honey Buzz, I have not played it, but I know it's quite popular, and I know that was one that was tested out of Protospiel.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so bees came out of Protospiel as well. Protospiel Madison, I believe.
Oh, really? Okay, that's great to know. Thank you. I met this designer at a Unpub event, and
I know Marcus really, really well. So full disclosure there, Marcus and I are good buddies. We worked on a recent project together, but we met through this game. This game really caught my eye. So I sat down and talked more about it with him.
I know that, like he said, for the prototype, he found like little bee erasers, and then they decided to really use little bee erasers for.
Yes, they did. Game. They got like, I don't know, 60 or 70 of these little bee erasers. So he had found them at like Dollar General or something like that. But they were so perfect. They were the right size, and they're a little bit squishy, that he talked to the producer about whether or not they'd be able to do that, and the publisher ended up going with it. It was cost effective enough, and they're so adorable.
Yeah, that is awesome. Then let's see. So that's the insect world. Anything else that's insect based to talk about before we move on from
Hive.
that?
I didn't grab a copy, but
that's the one that I was
game Hive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's also using hexagons. Again, I agree with Michael. There is something about the hexagon that is really easy to associate with nature, largely because of the honeycomb and through bees, but we also think about that with a lot of other insects as well. So it features a grasshopper and a bee and some other insects, and it's a very chess-like game for 2 people, but you've got these really, really nice bake-like tiles that you place on top of each other with that for dominance in the insect world. But as I was looking at it, there are lots and lots of games with animals in there, and I was curious at first, Heather, why you chose animals as the a theme. I don't know if it was just the first one that came to mind for you, or did you have some hidden agenda?
Well, it's not the only A theme. Like I have a lot of themes, and I didn't try to hit one for every letter. We already did aliens and abstract in A, but
abstract is a theme.
Well, yeah, I don't know. You could call it a style or a theme. Like abstract means no theme, but usually there is a theme. So just like with Hive is a good example of that, right?
Or chess, even chess ostensibly has a theme. So
right. So there's also the columns in Bingo are theme, components, mechanics, style or format, and things about the designer. And so I could have put abstract in format maybe, but I chose animals because it seems like it happens frequently enough in prototypes. So as I was selecting things to put on the bingo card, I tried to pick things that I thought people would be making games about as much as possible.
So I agree with you that animals is very common, but in addition to the hexagon shape and that easy association with bees of the insect world, why do you think we see animals so often, and who do you think the target market is that we see for most animal-themed games?
I think animals are approachable. People really like animals, you know. And I guess
how jumpy the animal is. Some of them are very hard to approach.
Right. Yeah. Well, approachable, like you know what I mean. Relatable.
Fun.
Relatable.
Well, it's a very familiar theme, right? Yeah, no one is off put by a hedgehog. I think that's why
Gulo and the Hedgehog.
Yeah.
I think, we certainly see games with animal themes that are clearly directed at adults. I think Wingspan initially was for the gamer crowd, which is a little bit on the older crowd, but that game is also accessible to a wide variety. Almost every game that I grabbed is targeted toward a much younger audience, and I was wondering why were those the first ones that came to mind. And I think it's because they're so approachable. They're easy to teach and learn and understand as kids. We've got zoos that are museums for living animals that, a lot of people are familiar with. So they might not be versed in mythology or in archaeology, geography, whatever, but a lot of people seem to be versed somewhat in the world of animals. And so I think it's a really not only accessible theme, but the other thing I think is nice with it is artistically, you can have a lot of fun and you can try to make them realistic. Like Wingspan is a realistic depiction of these animals. And Elizabeth Hargrave did a lot of research to go into here to try to make this realistic. If you play the video game, it's got the actual bird calls from those birds in there when you trap them. But for a lot of the games, they are parodies of themselves. They are like Rhino Hero. That is not a realistic rhino, but it sure is fun to be able to kind of stretch that out and make a rhino a little bit more approachable and fun looking. Same with all of the dozens, if not hundreds, of games about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, right? So a play off of an animal is a really fun theme and gives you a lot of flexibility artistically as to how realistic versus how fantastic or cartoony you want to go. And a lot of that will also depend. The ones geared toward children's, obviously a lot more cartoony in general that we see. Mousetrap, even that you showed us, even though the mouse plays a very small role and it's more of the Rube Goldberg machine, it's got an animal theme, and the animal on the box and in there is very cartoony.
Well, and kind of back to Wingspan and how approachable it's like it's an obvious one to talk about because it sold over 1 million copies. It's a big deal in the game industry because of that. It's interesting. It's one of the games that I have it here to show you closer this time, but I usually have it behind me. It sits on the shelf behind me as something that I want people to notice that I have, I guess. And when I talk to people outside of the board game world, they notice it on my shelf actually. So it's like reaching that point, and it's really funny because it's not really an approachable game at all. It's very complicated, but it
It's
has
a lot more
a
complex.
hook.
Yeah.
Like basically, if you're a birder, I think that you're a collector of experiences of seeing a bird. You know what I mean? Like, it's a type of collecting. And this is not a set collection game, really. It's an engine building game, but I guess in a way you're collecting sets of birds that are water based, like birds that live in the water habitat, birds that live in the forest and in the grasslands, right? It's kind of like collecting a set, even though that's not the point. But
it's interesting because the first time I saw it, I remarked about the beautiful design, but I was overwhelmed by all the iconography and all the information. Like the wingspan of the birds actually makes a difference for some of the things that your engine may look for. And
in a thematic making sense kind of way, like a bird of prey won't eat a bird if it's bigger than this or whatever.
Right. I didn't like the game the first time I played it because I was really overwhelmed by it. And then I played it on the computer where I could play it at my pace and I could play it over and over again. And suddenly something clicked with me going, okay, now I understand. This is like the first time I played Dominion, I didn't understand what it was that we were trying to do. And the first time I played Wingspan, there was so much going on that I really didn't know what my strategy should be. And that's a game that with repeat plays, I began to appreciate more and more. And then thematically, I could see why a lot of those decisions were made, which I think is, as a designer, one of the really interesting things between the way the resources are drafted or the biomes that the birds are ascribed to. There's a lot going on in that game.
Yes.
Jay, you're not like a biologist or a bird watcher. Do you have any association with that theme outside of games at all?
Absolutely not. None whatsoever. But the theme did not turn me off at all. The theme was actually quite interesting because of the variety of all the different birds. And I thought, this is kind of neat. What other type of wildlife do we think of that has this range of diversity? And there aren't that many.
Well, insects, big time, but they're not as beautiful.
Right. Diverse around the world, but then also diverse in their look and their size and everything. From little hummingbirds up to albatross. I mean, you've got so much variety in the bird world.
Delicious little jelly beans.
Yeah, and it's fun. They're very tactile eggs, but then they have the nice flat bottom, so they sit still when they're on your cards. So the eggs are really engaging. I remember when I sat down first time to play this game, I was like, I am in heaven. I am so happy. Like, before even I started playing it, just because of the bird art and everything. Like, I'm not really a birder, but my grandma had bird feeders and she had books to help her identify the birds that came to the bird feeder. So like, I remember as a child, like looking through those books. So it like immediately just put me in my element and I was happy, even without being a birder. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
It is, but it was very complicated from the beginning, right? So I'm just used to that. But if you were a noob to games, I could see how it would really intimidate you. And that is kind of what is happening to people when they're like, oh, Wingspan, it's a Target. Let's get it. And then they open it up and they're like, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into?
But there are people that stick with it and they finish it and all of a sudden they're in the hobby. Like if you can handle Wingspan, and I don't think you have to have played prior games to figure it out. I think it's maybe a slower learn if it's your first game, but it's clear, and like you said, with repeat play, it builds on itself. And once you've done that, it opens up. It makes a lot of other games that felt unapproachable before because of an unfamiliar theme mechanically be a lot more approachable, and that makes it a really good game. I think it deserves the success that it has, Wingspan, because it's an excellent implementation of component design. You showed off those eggs, which are beautiful and well thought out, and how they fit and roll and move. The dice tower, which is like a
bird feeder.
That's a hardcore RPG concept, a dice tower, and they're implementing that in this friendly, approachable way. Beautiful bird feeder, wonderful, gorgeous art, great mechanical design of the game, like the way that the systems work, and then a really, really good marriage of those mechanics and the theme, the nature, and how they build together. And so it's a wonderful game, and I'm
I think
glad.
it also benefits from the fact that it's been out long enough now that there
Mhm.
are a number of fantastic videos online that can teach Wingspan to you in a way that might be more approachable than trying to go through the rule book on your
Right.
own. You
Yeah.
can watch sessions of it. You can go to a different site and watch a 5 to 8 minute explanation and kind of follow along with it, or whatever. But it's been around long enough that it has been given a lot of fantastic treatment online, warranted.
Mhm.
So I think that helps make it more accessible too. And for a lot of the people who would go and be the person who would pick this up at Target, is probably the type of person who uses Google to ask questions for and
Yeah.
pull up resources and content like that. So,
Well, and like you said, too, video game implementations of it as well
Yep.
can help, people learn it, help it get more exposure and everything. So, yeah, definitely a boon to our hobby that it came out.
Yeah.
Very happy about that.
So talking about animal games as a theme and as a popular theme, like we mentioned, I've thought a lot about this recently. One thing that I really enjoy seeing in games is when I, as a player, can recognize the relationships between the systems and mechanics of the game and the thing that they're emulating. There's a term for it. You guys help me out. Abstraction, I think. Is that right? Where you are trying to take a thing that exists, like a system or an idea, and like race car driving, and then design it into a game where the mechanics reflect race car driving. So maybe you don't pour gas into your car, but you have a fuel as a resource. Maybe you don't actually have to steer around the turns, but there's a way that you manipulate the direction and angular momentum of your vehicle. But I think that's called abstraction. I don't know.
Possibly.
Anyway,
It's kind of the other side of simulation, right?
yeah, maybe
The
simulation's
opposite of
the word I'm
simulation.
looking for. But I love it as a player when I can see how the systems in the game reflect the thing that they're simulating. And I think a lot of people like to see that relationship. But if the theme is unfamiliar, or even if it's fun or approachable, it can be hard to catch on to that. So, like, if I played a really, really good game about I don't know, about farming with large industrial farming equipment, it might be a good game. I might enjoy it, but I probably wouldn't recognize the design relationships between, how this thing actually functions, kind of like a John Deere tractor. But
so like Rhino Hero, the fact that it's a rhino is completely meaningless, right? It could have been any type of animal. But to Michael's point, I had some students design a game, and they designed If the Zoo Fits, which is just an absolutely fantastic game.
Great
and
fun.
It is a drafting and zoo sim. So they wanted to make sure that it felt like creating a zoo. So when they designed animals, for example, in order to be able to provide for the animals, they have certain requirements. For example, sharks are worth a lot of points, but they also need a lot of resources. They need water and they need food. Whereas birds need food, but they also need space. So they ended up coming up with a variety of resources that they thought would make sense. For managing animals. That some animals need more food than others, some need more land than others, more water. And what I thought was really interesting is more fun and socialization. That some animals are just more social than others. So if you want to keep them happy, you need to make sure that you're providing them an environment that allows for that. And that, to me, was one of the things that made everything come together, where it felt like a really, really good theme for the types of mechanics they had selected.
That's exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about, Jay, because we all have this knowledge that starts when we're 1.5 and we read, kids' books about how tall the giraffe is and that he has spots and the lion goes roar. I know this very well. I have kids 2, 4, and 6, and they know more animal facts than either of you do, probably. And so you can build systems where creatures have, or cards have, a cost associated with where the animal stays, because everyone knows that sharks live in the water and everyone knows that sharks eat meat, not plants. Like, it's just this knowledge that's ingrained in us as people through the education system that we grow up in and gets books. And so it makes it, I think, a lot easier for a designer to show the theme and the systems and how they work, and for the player to get that regardless of their background. I don't have to have a fantasy background. I don't have to have a sci-fi background. I don't have to know how a drag car works to see how this game reflects the mechanics. That is an appeal to me for nature or animal games, and I think it's an appeal for a lot of people. I think that's why they have so much success, especially in the casual and the younger market, because it uses our pre-existing knowledge base level, not animals.
It's a knowledge type that I don't think we forget or lose track of easily either if we're not a fan. I had designed a game about the 30 Years' War, so I did a lot of research about the 30 Years' War. I might know more about the 30 Years' War than some people, but that's very, 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 very little. Right? Like, I've forgotten almost everything that I had learned, other than there was a really big war that took 30 years. But you don't forget those statements that Michael was talking about sharks. We don't decouple that information, even though we may not know a lot about sharks or have read about sharks or watched Shark Week. That kind of information is really, really well coupled with us, and we don't seem to lose our grip on that over time, which is another reason why I think that these are very accessible across the entire range. If you grow up playing games about animals, you might be more open to other games about animals, and just as an adult, because that's a type of knowledge that we have carried with us through our, the Hungry Caterpillar. I'm just trying to, the Pout Fish. I'm trying to think of almost all of the kids' books that we read our children.
I've got hundreds in the other room, and
the
just a random selection. They're mostly books about animals.
All the animals in Richard Scarry's Busy Town, everything is really animal related. And anthropomorphic. So
the anthropomorphic animal thing.
As are the characters in Arthur, and the characters in Peppa Pig, and the characters in Bluey, and the characters in, what are you holding up right there?
This is Raccoon Tycoon. So here's another example of the animals do not matter at all. It doesn't matter that there are animals in this at all. Meaningless.
But we love anthropomorphized.
Yeah, they're so cute. It really draws you to want to play the game. It's an economic it's an economic game, basically, of supply and demand.
When I see that, though, I do make some assumptions. When I see a raccoon, I expect it to be devious, clever, smart, maybe steal from other people. There are certain attributes, human attributes, that we do ascribe to some types of animals. Bulldogs being tough, independent, maybe fierce, loyal. There are certain attributes that, if those are reflected, again, it may not be realistic that these are anthropomorphic animals, but it does still reach into a little bit of what Michael was talking about before. Is there is a way to get some of the characteristics that we do see maybe in ourselves expressed in animals. And if those come across, that's another thing that's kind of reassuring to us, that we understand that. We always think of our one cat, Meep, as a raccoon because he's got a little bit of that deviousness to him. He looks a little bit like a raccoon, but there are certain characteristics that we do use to describe animals that we also use to describe people, and so we make those associations.
That actually goes back to why it's a rhino in Rhino Hero, because rhinos are kind of like lumbering and dundering, and you're trying to get him to climb the building without knocking the building down, right? So that maybe that's why they picked a rhino.
Yeah, as opposed to something that's very elegant and good at climbing, like a monkey.
Right. Could have been an elephant or something, but yeah, right.
That's fun.
Or then another one that I think of is Ice Cool, that is penguins.
Is that the penguins flicking them through the created board?
They're Weeble Wobbles, right? That you flick, and the box. This game is really interesting because the box is the board, so it's like this very clever nested box.
Love it.
That it has you can see the doors in the side here, and then also in here. But yeah, they have little penguins to flick, and then they're trying to catch fish. You put the fish over the doorways. You want them to go through the doorways so you can collect the fish. The idea is that they're playing hooky. They're teenage penguins in ice school.
That makes me want to think of how many games could we find if we had an episode on games that use the packaging during play. That would be interesting, because I think that's a very, very clever use of not only the material, but also it's a clever kind of like life hack for them to be able to use something that they're already producing and investing money and time into in the production process. And then, hey, can we find a way to actually implement this with our game as well? That's especially clever.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
I was playing Castle Panic, the kids edition, several times recently, and they used the box as the dungeon to throw the baddies into, and it's themed as well. So I love that mechanic. I'm glad that it's not on the Protospiel Online bingo board, because you wouldn't run into it a lot. And it's always frustrating. Not frustrating. It's always appreciated when I've played the bingo game a couple times, and I'll look at the chart, and sometimes you'll see something and you're like, oh, I can totally find a game like that. But every now and then you'll see a topic and you're like, there's no way anyone has a game. That's an impossible square. No one's going to have something in that super niche category.
You could tell me about them. I mean, I might be able to rearrange it a little bit, but you also can. You can redo your bingo card if you don't like it.
Yeah, it's a fair out. Yeah, the Aliens one is giving me trouble. I don't think I have ever seen an Aliens game at Protospiel Online, and I have gotten that on a bingo card. But it could be. It's not a completely...
That feels like a challenge, kind of like the Las Vegas Frankenstein game. And we come up with a nice good. Actually, I did see a alien game at Protospiel. I don't know if you ever had it at Protospiel Online, but Nate, I forgot your last name, but you had made a really cool game about shooting down aliens, almost like Space Invaders, right? Like shooting down aliens before they were able to land on Earth. But I have seen a few, but you're right, it is a more rare theme than others.
Yeah, and we covered it without you, and we were a little bit like, oh no, can we even find? We found a few, and there's some things like King of Tokyo that has like an alien in it, right?
Really good enough. It counts.
Outside of like licensed aliens property one, I'm just looking around me. I've got lots and lots of games around me. There are different settings that are sci-fi settings, but would you immediately include that in there? There is a pretty popular game that you can buy at Target. That's where I ended up getting it, called, I think it's The Last Defense or The Final Defense, where you're running around the city trying to prevent aliens from landing. And it's a cooperative game running around there, which I thought was really, really interesting.
That one's new to me.
Yeah, it's tough to find that in a lot of fantasy ones, a lot of Renaissance ones. But I'm not seeing as many alien-based ones.
Like I said, I've never run into one in the wild at Protospiel Online, but I have seen an animal game every single time I've attended. It is, I think, a very popular thing, and for good reason. What other games did you guys want to showcase? Does Root count? I guess anthropomorphized animals are their own subcategory, and Heather, you just gave the Tycoon example for one. But I thought of Root right away, because that's a game that I think feels approachable, even though it's not, because of the cutesy animal characters cover. Another one. Sorry, I didn't send any of these to you before, Heather, because I just ended up getting really busy with work. But there's a game I really love called what is it called? It's about alpaca. I think it's named after the mountains of the
Altiplano.
area. Altiplano. Thank you. And it's
okay.
Yep, it's a game about, I mean, you don't play as the alpaca, but it's a game about basically the economy and this society surrounding raising and shearing those animals. So and the alpaca are featured on the front of it. It's not just about that animal, but you do, if I remember correctly, get wool from them and I think there's some movement. It's been a minute since I played it now, but I really enjoyed that one. It was my first exposure to a rondel system, I think, that I was aware of.
What's nice too is when they actually are able to make components that are animal shaped. This is from Animal Upon Animal by Haba, which has a lot of games with big, chunky wooden pieces. You might be familiar with these, Michael. They make a lot of children's games, but you're stacking these animal shaped pieces on top of each other, trying to keep them the big stack from falling down. And there are snakes and monkeys and sheep and alligators, and these animals don't make sense going together, but they make very interesting different shapes and different colors.
Well, that's fun.
But one of the first games that came to mind when I thought animals don't really have anything to do with the gameplay, but it's Through the Desert by Reiner Knizia, where you are theoretically merchants going through the desert, and so you've got these pack camels with you, and all the little pieces that you're placing down to show where you've been traveling and kind of marking your trade territory are these little camels. And the first edition that came out, they were all pastel colored, and people thought they were candy. So if you weren't really paying close attention to them, people might have heard of the pastel camels before. Have either of you heard of those before or come across that? Oh my goodness, it was so interesting, and it's a more rare edition now. More editions of that have come out, but the one that I have still has the pastel candy-like camels. So
yeah, this is the first time I've heard of that one. Actually,
Reiner Knizia.
That reminds me of not the camels, but the stacking animals reminded me of Snorta, which I threw in the chat, Heather, if you want to pull that up. That is a game that is all about animals, and it taps into that. Talking about kid animal games, what does a kid know about animals? They know what sound the cow makes. They know what sound the pig makes, right? And this is not the best review game in the world. I think this is a hoot with mixed company, because it doesn't really give a huge edge to the adult over the child. And so I've played this with my nephews and things like that. And the gist of the game is you have an animal and you have a barn that you use to cover the animal, and
these
so
are some pretty fun pieces too.
Yeah, they're fun pieces. There's not a lot to it, so the components they have are really fun and kind of animated. And it's a memory game at its core. You have to try and remember what animal other people have, and the components are designed where you can see your own animal, but you can't see what everyone else has. And then you play a game of basically passing the turn between players by calling out their animal. I forget the exact rules, but it involves making animal noises for other players. And so you have to remember what they have and then hee-haw at them or crow at them or snort at them. And so you just get a bunch of kids and adults in a circle trying to remember stuff and making loud animal noises at each other. And I always end up laughing. And it scales really well for different ages. So that's a fun game.
Makes sense that they chose snort as the name, because it's like laugh.
You literally at people. And
you might accidentally snort it if you get laughing too hard as well.
Yep. It'd be very confusing since that's an animal call. It's that knowledge that everyone has about animals, and it builds that into the game. So it means there's less of a language for you as a player to have to learn, because it builds on this common knowledge we all have. And I think that works well in the theme in general.
There's also just like the house pet kind of thing.
Yes.
Calico.
Lots of games about cats and dogs.
A recent add to my collection that's been very happy. It's just got a lot of tokens with cats and other cute positions like this, and it's a pattern building quilting game. It's actually pretty frustrating and difficult to get an awesome score. There's some luck involved and stuff, but it's just because of the art, it's so gentle and inviting.
One year I had one called Perplexed, and then which was actually creating a quilt and trying to get your cats to come to your quilt. And then Picture Perfect, where you were trying to get a family of cats to line up and be still long enough to be able to take a picture, which was really, really cute. But yeah, animals are pretty common theme with my students, again, because I think the accessibility part of it has a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
Or then like another really popular one is the Isle of Cats. But this is a...
Oh, that's a pretty cover.
I don't have actual Isle of Cats. It's highly fiddly. It takes a lot of time to set up and put away. I don't know if either of you played that one? It's so this incorporates cats in their weird positions, like laying around. So like it's a Tetris piece with a cat like stretched in a weird way, right? And so you're puzzling them. Yeah, you're puzzling those together. And in real life, or in the real main game, they are tetrominoes, but they're polyominoes. And polyominoes being not necessarily always 4, right? Tetrominoes being like Tetris is always 4 squares. All the pieces are 4 squares. But and you're putting them on a boat. But in Explore and Draw, I think you can only get it from the company's website. Like it's not as widespread as original, but you have this boat and you just draw on it. You're sailing to an island to rescue all these mystical cats, right? And this one, I like it because it's got almost the exact same mechanics, just the way that you draft the cats is different, and it's way easier to set up. It's way easier to just get a play in. So can recommend. You're just going to have to look for it, especially, I think, on the... What is the company's name that makes this? I should know, but I don't. And they don't... See, now, companies. Put your logo on the box. I can't find your name right now. Maybe it's on the back.
Excellent point.
Makes it easier for me to shout you out if... it's wow. I see the logo, but I can't read the name.
If it's that difficult to do by looking at the back of box, oh my goodness.
It's not, yeah. Although Isle of Cats is pretty famous, so they've managed to market, and certainly
they've done something.
You've probably heard of Isle of Cats, right? But I can't remember what COG stands for. So I'm sorry, I can't say the company's name. Anyway, but you have to go to their website. It's not on Amazon. Not as easy to find, but. And then another thing that's about arranging animals based on their shapes is this very odd, interesting game called Beasts of Balance.
Sounds like there's stuff in there. Oh.
Yeah, it's kind of an absurd technological monstrosity. But it's unique, and it's very abstract art too. Like, even though they're animals, they barely look like animals. Like, I think this is the eagle.
Oh.
Okay, and they have this, I don't even know what you call the technology, but they have this indicator, right? And then this electronic plinth that you stack them on. Here, I'll just leave it in the box, right? And it goes with an app. So you're playing, as you're placing them on the plinth, they're going into a different habitat, and like they're taking up each other's space in the habitat. So there's more to it than just a dexterity game, but it's a video game. It's a combo video game, dexterity game about animals. And you look at it and you're like, that seems absurdly expensive. I got it way on sale, right? So that's why I have it. And it is just a fun getting started activity that, engages, because again, the animals and the pieces are really, like, they feel really good. They're kind of soft plastic.
Interesting.
Yeah. And just the tech of it.
Do we have an episode that is about the marriage of technology and tabletop?
There's a Building the Game podcast episode about that I was featured on.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's right.
I've had that discussion pretty recently. Yeah. I'd love to hear what you two have to say about it, though. I think it's a really interesting topic. There's a lot of overlap between physical board games, card game, tabletop games using technology to better or enhance their games. And then on the flip side, there's a whole lot of video games that intentionally designed themselves to reflect physical components, even though that constraint isn't there. And I think it's because those constraints of things like cards and dice, you see those in games a lot because they lend themselves to good design mechanics and things like that.
Yep.
The
Well, just
music
think of the entire Slay the Spire style of
Mhm.
game, where you're drafting cards in the video game to be able to,
right.
and they fan out like a hand of cards, and they function like cards. But I'm almost sorry I brought that up since we did stray a little bit off of animals. Sorry about
Well,
that.
I have animals to talk about. So I mentioned over
Fantastic.
at the front that I've spent the last 2+ years designing an animal card game. It's actually the game that drew me into game design. I played this game as a kid called Into the Forest, I think. You can still find it on BGG. It's basically a modification of the old war card game where you and your opponent will play cards and they go head to head. But it's like war meets Go Fish. It's a very simple game. But the thing about that game, and it's not a very good game either, but the thing about it that drew me to it as a kid is it all hinges on so Go Fish hinges on matching numbers, and war hinges on a number line. A 7 beats a 2, a king beats a jack. And in this game, and Into the Forest, it has to do with food chains and systems. So a badger beats a I don't know, some kind of small insect or a locust or something like that, and so, or an owl beats a raccoon. I mean, beats a chipmunk. And so
that would be rough. Anyway.
I mean, an owl probably could beat a raccoon.
It just would get put up a fight, I think.
It tied into this knowledge I already had as a kid about how certain animals related and what they hunted, and it built these little like mini systems of interconnected animals, and this really simple mechanic of bigger thing beats smaller thing. And so I wanted to build a game about that, and 2-3 years later I have, with a lot of other mechanics to it. But that was the foundation. That was the thing that interested me and made me want to flesh a game around it. So the clearing this is a prototype box cover, but it's a deck building game with a rondel system where players try and control habitats to leverage their creatures and make them more powerful, make their creatures perform better by making the active habitat match the type of creatures that they have. You have a bunch of different North American creatures. Unlike a lot of deck builders, every card is unique. So there's like 52 different unique creature cards. And the system that matches what I talked about in the Into the Forest game is that the purchasing system for all of the cards, the way you buy them, their gold cost, so to speak, is based on their diet. And that's something that I think is very familiar and approachable to people. So there are cards like the Leaf that are just a food. This is a thing you can feed to creatures. But then all of the creatures have a cost here at the top of the card. It's usually an either or. So a scarab is a very small omnivore. And if you didn't know that, now you do. They'll eat berries and bugs and debris, but they'll also eat other insects and things like that. And so you can feed this either a green card like this, or you can feed it another blue card like the scarab, and that's the cost of the card. And so just that nature of the card cost being tied to creature types let me build this system where creatures are connected. Either they're standalone stuff like the bison, which eats a whole bunch of green and yellow things because it's a very large herbivore. There's something like a rattlesnake, which is a carnivore and will only eat other smaller creature types. It lends itself to a lot of different things that end up setting the clearing apart in a lot of ways from other deck builders. And that's one of the most consistent and positive feedbacks I've gotten for the game is this game feels very different than other deck builders. And I think it's because it's designed around this purchasing system that is so different from get enough gold to buy the best thing.
Are you trying to build a seamless hierarchy?
That is
food, or is
what you're doing. So that is how you. So first off, you acquire creatures by having the right things in your hand, by getting what it would eat, and then the scoring system is really the one part of the game that I'm still tweaking. The game is kind of in development because I'm actively pitching it to people and I've had some interest. But when publishers look at it and they don't want it, usually the thing they point to is what ideas do you have in the scoring system. But one part of the scoring system is you are trying to build, like you said, a hierarchy of creatures, a food chain where there's a set of creatures where one eats the other. The other scoring systems relate to the habitats the creatures are from and trying to build an ecosystem in a specific habitat. But I want all the scoring to be reflective of what we have as mostly common knowledge about creatures. And then in that, maybe teach people a little bit too. Because I think that's part of Wingspan's appeal, is everyone knows these basic facts about birds, but then you're like, oh, I've never heard of this bird. Oh, it lives in this kind of environment. I didn't know that there was a carnivore bird that was that big and it ate small. So there's like both the base knowledge and then the education. And I'm trying to do the same thing with my game as well.
Who's your target market for that?
It's a middleweight game. The target market would be people that are familiar with games, but not hardcore. So it's a family audience, but it's not the bingo, Parcheesi, Monopoly Deal family audience. It's people that have played Catan with their family and people that play Secret Hitler and people that play Wingspan. So it's a middling.
Easier than Wingspan, though.
Yeah, it is easier than Wingspan. So it's a middling weight game, and the audience is broad. It's a mass market audience is the goal. Although I think the art direction will affect that a lot, which we talked about earlier on in the game. So a little bit dependent on the publisher, but hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, and you said every
heavily informed. Oh, go ahead, Heather.
Well, every card is unique, which sounds kind of overwhelming, but they've been designed well to have repeated sections of them, right, that are easy to understand. So
yeah, the cards are grouped in a way that hopefully pretty quickly becomes apparent as you play it, where this is a certain type of creature, and I'll see that reflected in other types of creatures, even if they're from different ecosystems or they have a slightly different power. And so players will start to chunk creatures together in the way that they exist in nature. But with the uniqueness, I want to add a little bit of education in there. Maybe take like the flavor text like you see in trading card games and throw that on the bottom and give people like a 1 or 2 liner about something about this animal or creature they didn't know, and reflect that in the art as well.
So 52 cards is a lot for an artist, but it's not a lot to put into a package. So tarot-sized cards would be fantastic for that. You'd have plenty of space on a tarot-sized card for a huge, beautiful piece of art, whatever information you need to convey, and then, maybe 2 lines of flavor text on the bottom. And if part of what you're doing is eventually laying down a tableau, even if it's just at scoring or at the end, you're going to make a really, really nice splash. Like Dixit would not be the same if it were on the mini cards. There are a lot of games that use tarot cards, even Seven Wonders, because you're building something that needs to be not only seen by you, but by others. So interesting. I can't wait to hear more about it, because as long as we've been doing this show and running into Michael before at Protospiel Online, I have not seen that game before.
Yeah, it's a game I've played like 3 times now, and it's really fun. I think it usually is a hit with people who get to play test it. It's if you play test that at Protospiel Online, it's closer to a finished game. Like you're actually going to play a game and probably get to the end and see. That
is where it's at right now. I think it's at the point where it's enjoyable to play in its own right, but because it's been like my game that describes my designer journey, it's also a game that I continue to learn on. And I could probably design it for 10 years and still learn new things, but it's also at a point where it's finished enough that I'm bringing it and showing it not just to designers but publishers too, and getting their feedback on it and learning, okay, how do I turn this thing, which is now a game, into a product, and something that would fit the right audience, like you said. And so it's been a lot of things to me, but it's the thing that got me into game design, and so that's why I have a soft spot in my heart for animal games, because I think that they're like you said, very approachable and a really good theme to try and connect with people.
Yeah,
I know that I told you, Michael, that you should play Parks because it's about habitat. I don't know. It has animals in it. It has animeeples.
Yeah, I know about Parks. I have not played it, but I know a good bit about it. And it's a great game. Yeah.
It's maybe like a travel themed game at the same time as being an animal themed game.
It's about the wonder and beauty of North America and the national parks that we have.
First time we played this game. So you have different resources, and the animal resources, each one is a unique animal. And we played it and accidentally did not read the rules correctly, did not realize that these seem like they should be special. They're so cool, but they're like not very useful. They weren't working out in the game. They're wild resources. Wildlife. They're wild resources. Somehow we missed that the first time. And the person who had like a card that let them connect them, they're like, I have a ton of these. What am I supposed to do with them?
I've totally done that. Where I played a game and I'm like, man, this one part of the game felt kind of broken. It felt off. And then we go read the rule book again and we're like, oh, that's because we didn't read the rule book right.
We're doing it wrong. Well, we make our way better. It's pretty interesting. Oh, well, should we move on to, do we have a design challenge today? Or questions?
I do. And it's even involving animals, so we should definitely use it this time.
Bring that up. I don't want to forget. Let me give a 15-second plug to Endangered. That's another excellent, very animal-themed game. A game I got to play at Geekway, and it's a game about humans and animals interacting. Yes, there you go. There are still new expansions for that being worked on by Joe. I got to test some stuff that's in playtesting to be added to it. But it's a really cool game, and it's all about the animals, but also about what we as people can do to protect them and to protect their environment and to lobby and advocate for them, since animals don't have anyone in a Congress seat for themselves. So really cool game with animals at the forefront.
And it's also Protospiel tested. My first.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Well, my first Protospiel that I brought a game to, my second Protospiel I attended, I played that game with Joe before it was published. And he brought it to so many, both Unpub and Protospiels, as he was very carefully developing that game. So
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's look at this design challenge.
All right, so it's animals is the theme. Role-playing animal game with a specific number of rounds, and you have to interfere to win. I'm not really sure what that means.
I have played games where you can object, like Phoenix Wright, or interject yourself if you have a ability or something that would preempt, kind of like Instance and the old interrupts from Magic. But I could see this about being King of the Hill style game where you're trying
exactly where I was going. I was going to say King of the Jungle would be the...
So you could either have like one big animal, like a lion, let's call it 10 points, or you could have 3 other animals that are worth 3, 3, and 4 that add up to 10, and you're battling for who has superiority. So the way that you would interfere is by one-upping whoever the current king of the hill is. But in order to play the card, you have to make the animal sound. And you have to like do something like that, and the rest of the group would either yes or no whether or not you were getting into character enough. Well, that was my initial hot take. What was yours, Michael, since you were also thinking King of the Hill?
Funny, really similar kind of theme, and then it completely diverges from there. So I was thinking like King of the Hill, best animal for the job, where characters are dealt out a random animal from some deck of animals. So you're a gopher, you're a hedgehog, you're a lion, whatever. And then there's a scenario set up, and players have to role play out how their animal is best equipped to handle this situation. And so maybe the scenario is a natural disaster, or there's a global shortage on cheese. It'd be like a ludicrous kind of game, and you have to step in and say, well, as you know, as the lion in this situation, here's what to do. And then
it sounds like a little snake oil. It just definitely sounds like
it's a little bit like snake oil. It's a little bit like that. What's that game from Flying Leap Games with the situations? I'm trying to think. anyway, yeah, it's you have to come up with you have to role play out how your animal would be best equipped to save the day. And I could see you interjecting or interfering in with like a one-up. Oh yeah, well, if you did that, and here's how my animal would step in and win, or here's how I'm better seated, or here's the flaw in your argument. And each round would have a winner where they were apples to apples style. Everyone would vote on the best equipped animal for the round, and they would win the round, and then you would go on again from there.
Are you talking about Wing It?
Yeah, I'm talking about Wing It.
Okay. From playing Leap games,
which uses that kind of mechanic of a few people have an absurd situation they have to solve, and then everyone votes on the person that comes up with the best solution using some constraints.
Okay. Yeah. I guess that's a philosophical question of what is the definition of role play? Because like, are you in character if you're just saying like,
oh my gosh,
as Lion, I would do this? Or
I got into a 30-minute argument with my younger son about what a role-playing game is, and he was arguing that every computer game is a computer role-playing game, so saying CRPG is stupid. Just like saying every game that you play, if you're Monopoly, you're role-playing as an investor. Is that any different than Dungeons & Dragons? I'm like, yes. And then we were saying, well, what systems make role-playing? Well, then call it something other than role-playing. And it was just really interesting how he was so heated. This 15-year-old was like so angry at the industry for abusing roguelike and role-playing in the description of games.
If he's anything like me at 15, he watched a YouTube video that told him that the term was being used wrong, and now he's built it. It's his cause to champion.
I told him that everybody uses roguelike wrong because so few people have played the original Rogue.
Very few people have played the original Rogue. Okay. But a lot of game designers use roguelite now as a term, and that's a better term for the subgenre. To answer your question, Heather, yes, I was literally saying you as the player need to put yourself in the mental space of this animal saving situation. So that's how I was calling it an RPG, not because you're rolling dice or putting things on paper or moving units, but because you literally have to think about a solution through someone's perspective other than your own.
Yeah, that makes sense. Or that's a component anyway of role playing.
Yeah.
That you have to pretend to be in a perspective that's not yours.
Yeah.
Somebody else's shoes or paws. Trying to view, yes. I would agree with that.
Cool.
Very good. Well, I don't think we incorporated rounds in the design, but I'll allow it.
I did, because you win a round. Like every time the round is who's best suited, and then the vote goes to that player, and they win the round.
Okay.
Situation.
And you do several rounds like that.
I have done very poorly at these, so I need to acknowledge that I checked off all the boxes.
Well, what about the interfering then?
People can
argue.
They can one up, or they can argue and say, no, actually, here's the flaw in your argument. I can do one better.
There you go.
That's the softest design, but I bet there's a way to build that in.
We need a name for this game, right? So we can refer back to it.
Mm-hmm. For mine, for the rounds, it would be every round you flip over a new hill, and the hill has a particular size. So you're trying to like Prices Right it, where whoever gets closest without going over is king of the hill. Otherwise, if you go over, you tumble down the hill.
Oh,
so you're trying to build up and assert your dominance, and then whoever wins that round takes that card to be able to show that they earned that point. Then you flip over the next hill that might have a value like 10 to 15 or something like that. You've got to be very, very frugal with your cards so that you don't overspend on a particular area. But anyway.
Very good. All right. Good job. You both get a gold star, I guess. Yes. I have those to give out. And then I know Michael has to leave right on time. So I think we can skip the audience question if that's all right with you.
Yep, that works for me today. The name of the game is going to be something with town hall, I think. I don't know what yet, but I'm picturing like these animals in a small community town hall and scaling the game down. And they're like standing up and giving their pitch for how they could help the community better.
So like a little bit like Zootopia.
Yeah, a little bit like Zootopia. Yeah, now you've got the animals that are very much like people. They're standing and talking, but they're also still very much animal, and like that their race and species matter in the story. Yeah, I think this is definitely turning into like Zootopia inspired, which is an amazing movie for my vote.
Very true. What did you say about Gilmore Girls, Jay?
I was
Didn't mean
thinking
to
it just
cut you off.
reminds me of like every other episode of Gilmore Girls. They come into a big town hall, but since it's such a small
Yes.
town, everybody fits in there. And then you've got the regular people with the regular arguments all the time.
Very
Tap
good.
into that. But yeah, I have to go. I will see you two
All right.
later. Have a good one.
We'll see you next week. We'll be back next week with let me remind myself, our auction bidding mechanic is next week.
Ooh, that'd be fun.
We'll see you then.
I have a game in mind already. See ya.
All right, bye everybody.
Have a good one.